Said in the previous video, Lee is going to take all of this momentum that he's gaining. He's going to try and capitalize it and bring his army up into the north and try to get a victory there. He's essentially what he's doing is trying to get his own version of Saratoga. He thinks that if he can get a major victory against the Army of Potomac in Northern Territory, that European powers like England and France would ally with them, with the Confederacy, and recognize the Confederacy as an independent nation. But so he invades the North on September 4th, 1862. And he plans on going all the way into Pennsylvania, mainly to capitalize on the food that's there. But nonetheless, he's going to run into the Union Army September 17th, 1862, at a place called Antietam. But one of the things about this battle is that the Union should have easily have won this. They should have. I know it's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking here, but nonetheless, think about it this way. There's going to be a couple of soldiers out in a field smoking cigars they had just found. And while they're smoking their cigars, they're going to come up with they're going to look at the paper that was keeping all these cigars together, and they're going to notice it's Lee's secret orders. It's Lee's orders and schedule of all the deployments of all his army, because his army was dispersed. You don't want to keep your army intact, particularly if it's a small one and there's a larger one out there. You want to disperse it so that it's never destroyed entirely. So Lee basically has a schedule and of positions of where his army is supposed to be. So of course, as dutiful soldiers, these guys, they go bring it to their officers, and they bring it all the way to General George B. McClellan himself. And McClellan looks at it and he basically says, "I have, if I don't whip Bobby Lee with this information, I will resign." Well, unfortunately, unlike 99.9% of the population of the world, McClellan doesn't act on it. Most likely, if you and I knew where our enemy was going to be at a certain time and knew that they were just heavily dispersed, you would be able to you would jump on him immediately. McClellan doesn't. He has what Lincoln calls the slows. Lincoln's got to cattle prod him in order to move. He's kind of like, I don't know, maybe a teenager reacting to their parents about cleaning up their room. Like, "Oh, fine, whatever, let's go. Leave me alone." Because McClellan doesn't have any respect for Lincoln. One of my favorite stories about McClellan and his disrespect for Lincoln is that one day Lincoln and the Secretary of State, William Seward, they're in McClellan's house. They call upon McClellan at his own house. And McClellan comes home from work, and he's told the President of the United States and the Secretary of State are in there, basically in his parlor. And what does McClellan do? He goes upstairs and basically takes a shower, he takes a bath, and then has his servants say, "Oh, sorry, the general's gone to bed." I mean, imagine if that happened today. Imagine if some prominent general who had the President of the United States and the Secretary of State in his living room, and he comes home and he goes to bed rather than greet his commander-in-chief. What would happen to that person? Well, not very good things is probably going to be the answer, right? Well, Lincoln just lets it slide. It's like water off a duck's back. But he does learn a very important lesson in the fact that Lincoln is going to demand that McClellan come to him rather than the other way around. But this is the kind of disrespect that McClellan has for his commander-in-chief. But nonetheless, McClellan is going to be cattle prodded into moving, and that's exactly what he does. But the problem is that once McClellan finally moves his gigantic army and he reaches Antietam Creek or Sharpsburg, the two armies are starting to basically consolidate. Lee is already calling in his men to make sure that he has as many people as possible, and we'll see that by the end of the battle, the entirety of Lee's army is there, and McClellan is going to unleash his army, unfortunately, piecemeal against Lee. I mean, and so it's a tactical draw. No one side commands the field by the end of the day. It's the bloodiest day in American history. 3,500 people are killed, 17,000 wounded, and 2,500 are missing. It's the bloodiest single day of the war. It's not the bloodiest battle. The bloodiest battle is going to be Gettysburg. But nonetheless, it's a draw. Nobody really takes the field as the victor. But by the next day, September 18th, Lee begins to recross the Potomac. So it's a tactical draw, which means the Union didn't lose. And so if you don't lose, what do? You win, right? So Lincoln uses this victory to announce what he calls the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's the Antietam is actually the turning point of the war, although nobody knows it at the time. And and let me explain why, because a lot of people say Gettysburg was, and it actually was Antietam. Here's the reason why. The victory at Antietam allowed Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. If he did so after a defeat, it would look desperate. I mean, look at a presidential campaign. And if you see a presidential campaign to the candidate changing his campaign manager and his staff all the time, it looks like desperation. Well, that's what it would have looked like if Lincoln used a defeat to announce the Emancipation Proclamation. It would have looked like he's being desperate. But nonetheless, what does the Emancipation Proclamation do? Well, first of all, let's see what it says. It says that that slaves in rebelling states are henceforth and forever free. So my question to you, and I want you to think about it, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. How many slaves does that free? Let me say the statement again. All slaves in rebelling states are henceforth and forever free. The question is, how many slaves does that free? Think about it for a couple of seconds. Got your answer? What is it? If you didn't say 0, you're wrong. It frees 0 slaves. Think about the language. First of all, it says all slaves in rebelling states. Okay, well, what if you have a slave state that stays loyal to the Union? Maryland and Delaware are slave states that stay in the Union. What about their slaves? Are they going to go free? The answer, of course, is no. Maryland and Delaware keep their slaves all the way until the signing of the 13th Amendment, the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. So those slaves aren't freed. What about the rebelling states? Well, imagine, for example, if the Prime Minister of Canada outlawed, I'm wearing a green shirt. Let's say the Prime Minister of Canada signed a law saying that Americans could not wear green shirts in the United States territory. Would you follow that? Well, I mean, what authority does the Prime Minister of Canada have over you and I if we're not Canadians, right? None. We don't follow the laws of foreign nations. And if to the Confederacy, this is the President of the United States making a proclamation on a foreign nation. All right? So it has no force of law. There's no way of enforcing this. So the answer to the question, how many slaves does the Emancipation Proclamation free? The answer is actually 0. It frees nobody. But that's missing the point, though. The point is that the Emancipation Proclamation makes the North appear to fight against slavery. And if you as the North are fighting against slavery, what does that make the South? It makes the South look like they're fighting for slavery. It places the South on the wrong side of the issue. It basically precludes any possibility that that France or England is going to recognize the independence of the Confederacy. This was the one huge card that the Confederacy was always relying upon to try to get foreign intervention into this war. And now the Antietam has basically closed the door on that.